Thanks, Lord Mayor. Well, the motion is that the Council ensures the protection of animals in our city and makes every effort to bring about compliance with the law by all concerned, and makes every effort to ensure that the required legislation to regulate the operation of carriage horses is put in place, and that a report be provided on same. Lord Mayor, we're all very aware in the city from various different, I suppose, stories we hear and experiences we have, that there is a lot of animal welfare issues in our city. There's a lot of unnecessary suffering inflicted on animals in our city. We hear anecdotal evidence and we have personal experience of visits to both the dog pound and the horse pound, well, not the horse pound, but the dog pound, of unnecessary suffering by animals in our city. I do know that we have an equine vet separate to the licensing vet, and I suppose the questions that I have for the manager is this vet available 24/7 to assist Gardaí, and if so, can the manager please advise Garda stations that we have a qualified equine vet who can go out and assist them in a situation where they suspect animal welfare issues. I particularly asked the manager to advise Gardaí in Sundrive Road, the Bridewell, Store Street and Mountjoy Garda stations, because these Gardaí are at the coalface of cruelty and animal welfare issues, and they do require assistance of our equine vet so that they can deal with issues that maybe the equine vet would be much more helpful in sorting out. I want to know if our equine vet is an authorised officer under the Animal Health and Welfare Act, and if she is not, then maybe can she be so appointed under both the Animal Health and Welfare Act and the Control of Horses Act, because this will be hugely beneficial, because an officer under the Act will be able to check if a horse is chipped. She could also, if she is an authorised officer under the Animal Health and Welfare Act, issue an Animal Health and Welfare Improvement Notice, same as Gardaí, but our vet has the skills to complete such a notice, which in turn will help improve welfare of horses in our city and possibly reduce seizures, as well as, I suppose, improving education amongst horse owners. In relation to the horse pound, Lord Mayor, the inspections of the horse pound... Councillor,
you have 2 minutes as the first group is for Fianna Fáil, so I'll apply it extra 2 minutes to your time.
In relation to the horse pound, inspections of the horse pound and the dog pound should be carried out unannounced, not during 9 to 5, 5 days a week, unannounced, nighttime, weekends, to make sure that there is no unnecessary suffering inflicted on animals in our city. It is, I suppose, such an important responsibility. Now, I have written, and I know that members of the public have written, to City Council management, and the responses that I get back and others get back are that everything is okay. But that is not my experience. I have spoken to people who are operating at the coalface, Lord Mayor, and they tell me differently. They tell me that the situation in the dog pound is unacceptable, that animals in the pound are not, I suppose, treated, in a reasonable manner. We're not looking for, Rolls-Royce treatment, but certainly to eliminate any possibility of unnecessary suffering being inflicted on animals. So I suppose I would like the response of the manager in relation to those questions. And I think there's a further issue around, I suppose, how we regulate animals and animal welfare in our city, particularly horses and dogs in our city. I think there's an issue around, I suppose, where horses are allowed graze on city council land, tethered, I suppose, cared for, just left out in the freezing cold, where voluntary organisations have to go around during very poor conditions and feed them and make sure that they're okay. Animals, particularly horses, being kept in small back gardens. I think we have to look at our policy around allowing horses to be left grazing on city council land and encourage local youngsters and horse owners to, I suppose, behave in a responsible manner when it comes to the care of horses and any other animals in our city. But there's a serious problem, Lord Mayor, in relation to animal welfare in our city, and I welcome the support of members of the Council for my motion.
Thanks, Councillor. On behalf of the Green Party.
We at the Green Party are fully supportive of the motion. We do want to stress a few things, though. I think coming up to Halloween, we need to understand that there will be an increase of animal distress around the city. I like to praise the Dublin Fire Brigade on this point, that they work relentlessly 24 hours around the clock around the city to do all sorts of good work, but especially around Halloween time, I think they serve the city really well. And I would like to actually ask to get figures, if possible, on whether the number of animals saved or in distress during Halloween time increases. I'm sure it actually does. So, and to support Councillor Heaney's point that there is a section of animals in the city that actually do need a better care. But saying that, we also do have we do have animals that are well cared for in the city, and they are well cared for by a specific culture and heritage group, and we must support those people as well. So I don't think it's good to demonise certain sections, certain groups. So, and I think we need to support them when talking about horses and horse care and carriages. And I'd like to also broaden the conversation more into how we support animals in general and biodiversity in general, because if you look at the Tallow wetland story a couple of weeks ago, where wetlands was completely decimated with no care in the world for any of the species there, it shows that we as people still have a complete disregard for animal and animal welfare in general, and also the recent whale in the Liffey as well. So I think we can do better, and I ask that as a city we do better in that regards.
Okay, that as we reach 9 o'clock, we'll have to conclude that portion of the debate at this time, and we'll take it up at the next time there's motions on debate. We then move on. Sorry, just before I move off motions, there's 29 motions on the agenda, members, and as a lot of new members are here, it's possible to move your report. To move your motion for a report, which means the manager will give you a written response to your motion, and then you have the opportunity to resubmit it, change it, resubmit one on another one. Is there any motions which people would like to move for written report at this time? You just give your name.
Lord Mayor, item 24, please.
Item 24, Councillor Jackson. Any other councillors? Councillor Feeney? 14. Any other councillors? No? Okay. We move on then back to the breviates. With the exception of the North West Area Committee, sorry, Councillor Dahl. Yes, you can. Yep. With the exception of the North West Area breviate, are all the other breviates agreed?
Can we get
agreed.
a proposer and a seconder for them?
Can I get a proposer and a seconder?
Vincent Jackson, Christy Burke.
Sorry, Councillor Riley, you might just... Yeah, thanks.
Just in relation to the South East area, just in relation to staffing, 2 members of staff have left recently, and my understanding is there's no cover for them. I know that they've built up a good relationship with councillors and done a lot of work with councillors and residents associations, and it's a big gap in the delivery of services by Dublin City Council, particularly in the inner city, where, like I say, the 2 staff members have done a lot of very good work. And I know there is somebody who will jump in if there is an issue around staffing or a particular emergency issue, but there isn't anyone there to do the ongoing work that the 2 staff had been doing. And also, to add to that, there's no admin staff. So when residents ring up from Mercer House or Pierce House, there's no one to answer the phone, as I understand it.
I appreciate your intervention. It's not an item listed on the breviary, so you aren't entitled to raise it. But could I ask the manager to come back to you directly on it?
Yeah, but I suppose to all the councillors in the area, because it is an important issue. Just
if it's specifically listed on the breviary, we can raise it. But I can get the manager to come back to you on it.
Thanks.
Councillor Riley in the North West area.
Yeah, I would like to raise an issue around housing in the North West area, and I suppose particularly in the Ballymun area. I suppose it's no different to any other area in terms of antisocial behaviour by our own tenants. But there has been a particular strategy used in Ballymun this year, headed by Declan Ronan, that has just paid huge dividends. It really has been very welcome in the area, and I know we give out a lot, but I just wanted to, I think it was important to acknowledge his contribution to the community in Ballymun and what he is trying to do there. For example, I met someone on the street the other day and they said to me, I don't know what Declan's after doing in Coultry, he's after cleaning up the place. And that is from a resident that attends the Safety Forum meetings and is always very vocal.
Councillor.
I'll finish up now. I suppose what I wanted to ask is that management continue to support that strategy in Ballymun, and it is very labour intensive. It does take up a lot of resources, but I'd ask that is continued because it is paying off huge dividends.
Thanks, Councillor. Ruth kindly passed me a note saying not on the breviary either, and I suppose I let it go because it was my own area. But I would like to.
It was raised at the meeting.
It was raised at the meeting, but I beg the meeting's discretion on that one. But Manager, I would support. I think it's a very innovative project that's taking place out in Ballymun. I know I've been discussing it with the manager, and you might bring a report back to us on that, Manager. Could you? Thank you. Okay, with all the other breviaries passed. With all the other breviaries passed.
Can I just ask a question? The issue of antisocial in our housing was brought up before the elections and it seemed to have got lost. I think Brendan promised that there was a report going to go to the citywide JPC about it. I'm just wondering if any actions were actually taken, because we're constantly getting complaints about antisocial all across the city from our own tenants. It doesn't just come from them, it comes from private, but we've no say over that. So I'm just wondering if anything has come from that, because I know it was an issue raised earlier in the year that was action was promised on. Thanks, Chair.
Councillors, this is why we don't allow items on the breviary for discussion. But so we get the manager to come back to the councillors on that individually, okay? And thanks for that, Brendan. We will revert now back to the topical issue, which was discussed on the issue of the importance of safe injection centres. And my recollection was that we had already received contributions from the Fianna Fáil group, the Green group, the Independent group, and up next is the Fine Gael group.
Thanks, Ardvera. I fully, wholeheartedly support supervised injection centres, both in principle and their application. Simply treating drug addiction as a criminal justice matter doesn't work, and it hasn't worked, and we need to do something different. And as Minister of State Byrne has said, the decision not to grant planning permission for the injection centre in Merchants Quay is deeply disappointing, but in my view, not entirely surprising. I believe we need this service, but personally, if I was in charge of the legislation and the proposals, I'd actually have 4. I'd have one in the City Council, but I'd also have one in each of the 3 Dublin authorities. I don't think it's simply enough that we have a facility here in the city centre. I think if you look at examples in like the likes of the Insight project in Vancouver, you can see that there would have been an awful lot more dead people without the facility there, and indeed I think it works in partnership with what we'd call an approved housing body, and I think we need to flesh out and develop the proposals we have here much more vigorously. So that there's, I suppose, much more joined up thinking. I suppose also I will be very brief, that I also just want to take this opportunity as well then to mention some of the fantastic work that's actually been done by the HSE in my own area in the North East Inner City, particularly those professionals who were based in the former Summerhill Health Centre. I think those of the local councillors who were at the NEIC event last week, we learned more about the work they're doing going into homeless hostels, working with people with addiction issues to make sure that they are getting access to the primary care and the primary services linked in that they desperately need. It's not something that it's work that's not necessarily ever given credit or praise or given the opportunity to be remarked on, and I want to do that here. So thank you, Ardvera, Deputy Lord Mayor, for the opportunity to speak.
Representative from Labour. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I too support injection centres, and certainly this particular one where we're really talking about a pilot project. We have yet to see whether or not it will function satisfactorily in Ireland, But insofar as we can move away from the criminal aspect of it to the health aspect of it, it has to be desirable. We know too many people who inject. There's a lot of overdoses that have been increasing in recent years, and the nature of the toxic or the drug that they are injecting sometimes can come without any particular standard of seriousness or of intensity. So therefore an overdose can be very easy at any particular time. Also the possibility of coming into contact with other health authorities and to get further treatment. It's not a situation that we're going to be able to get rid of all problems in this respect. They are not going to go away, but certainly the greater focus on dealing with the problem in a safe fashion, which can be supervised and can bring into contact other health facilities and other treatment facilities and personnel, is to be desirable. So I would be very much in favour of us continuing in this particular fashion. I'm disappointed that planning permission wasn't granted. I should hope that that On Board Penola would go the other direction. And indeed, I would agree with Councillor McAdam that we should be looking towards having one in each area, each of the 4 areas of the city. Thank you.
Thanks you, Councillor Costello. On behalf of the Sinn Féin.
I think we're discussing this at a very appropriate time. And to tackle Dublin's drug crisis requires a multifaceted interagency approach. There's no one simple answer to the complex problem. And I say that as somebody who's been involved in attempting to tackle the drugs crisis along with other people in our community for over 20 years. A supervised injection facility is one aspect of a harm reduction approach. It is not and never was to be the panacea to the city's drug crisis. Supervised injecting facilities seek to reduce the harm associated with IV drug use, and SIFs are medically supervised spaces where people can inject drugs in a clean, supervised, hygienic environment. Supervised injecting facilities encourage people to stop using IV drugs on the street. It also serves, and this is very important for the wider community, it also serves to control the paraphernalia that goes with drug use. They are employed in a wide number of countries, including Switzerland, Germany, Spain, Holland, Austria and Canada. And SIFs also allow for fast tracking and access to public health care and pathways to treatment and rehabilitation. The European Monitoring Centre for Drugs and Drug Addiction in 2015 report stated that there is no evidence to suggest that the availability of safer injecting facilities increase drug use or frequency of injecting. These services facilitate rather than delay treatment entry and do not result in higher rates of local drug-related crime. Similarly, the Roundtree Foundation report in 2006 said supervised injecting facilities were associated with a reduction in injecting in public places and a reduction in syringes and drug-related litter in the areas. It is clear by all the contributions today and the wider debate that's taken place in the last while in Dublin, it is clear that street-based injecting is an issue both for the user, for the service providers and for the wider public, and it requires a solution-based response. A supervised injecting facility in Dublin would assist in tackling the problem both for the drug user and the wider community. On
behalf of the Social Democrats.
Thank you. It's unfortunate that this conversation has had to be fragmented a little bit and broken up into 2 separate nights, because I think, particularly in light of the decision that was made during the summer, it's very important that we get to discuss this as a council. In 2016, 354 people died as a result of an overdose. 2 out of every 3 of those deaths occurred in Dublin. 85% of those involved opiates. This rate is nearly double the suicide rate and higher than suicides and road traffic collisions put together. I've worked in the community and voluntary sector on issues associated with substance misuse all of my professional life. I've worked with people like Councillor Doolan, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Gannon, trying to bring more progressive policies into our city. The fact that we are now once again facing further delays in the facilitation of a safer injecting room in Dublin is appalling. At last month's meeting, there was a number of inaccuracies that I would really like to address this evening. The European Monitoring Centre for Drugs and Drug Addiction is an agency that exists to provide us, European members, with a factual overview of European drug problems and a solid evidence base to support informed drug laws and strategies. The European Monitor Centre, the benefits of providing supervised drug injection facilities include increased access to health and social services, safe hygienic drug use, reduced public drug use and associated nuisance, and we are all aware drug use in Dublin's public spaces is a matter of significant concern to the general public. There is no evidence whatsoever to suggest that the availability of safer injecting facilities increases drug use or frequency of injecting. These services facilitate rather than delay drug treatment and do not result in higher rates of local drug-related crime. Studies in Sydney found they are a successful gateway to treatment and can reduce ambulance call-outs for drug overdoses. I got involved in politics to bring progressive policies to the table. We desperately need a more progressive drug policy in Ireland. I would ask you all to carefully consider
Thank you, Councillor.
assumptions about safer injecting room and the premise of harm reduction in general.
And the last contribution on behalf of this People Before Profit, and then I'll open the list. So, Councillor Councillor DCR, thanks. There you go, Tim.
Hey, it's getting to that stage of the night. Everybody wants to go home. I suppose just to follow on from the debate without repeating too many of the points that were made, I fully support the idea of a supervised injection facility within the context of harm reduction, but also within the context of a greater and more joined up drug support framework, and certainly the colleagues in the community sector that I've consulted with in relation to the proposals around the Merchants Quay location would argue and say that generally speaking, the framework within which the Drugs Task Force operates and the National Drug Strategy operates isn't as well funded as it could be and isn't as well supported as it should be. And it's important to note that while an injection facility might have fantastic results, that within the context of the overall system, if that's underfunded, it's only going to be able to help so far. So fully supporting the idea of supervised injection facilities. I do, however, think that the decision to refuse permission at Merchants Quay was the correct decision because of where it is located, adjacent to a residential community and a schools community. And the international evidence would suggest that where they are located in more business districts, for example, where they're not adjacent to residential communities, then they don't present the same kind of concerns to local residents. So I would have been very much in favour of and I think that the Minister should take on this role of supporting the MQI to look for a location which isn't going to raise so many concerns with local residents. But having said that, 100% supportive of the facilities. But just as I said, in this particular case, I think that the decision and the location of it needs to be reconsidered.
Thanks, Tina. And on my own behalf, I suppose the issue of injection treatment centres have been very controversial, and I think the main reason for their controversy has been is that we are in many ways dealing with the issues in isolation to other tools that are available. First of all, and certainly in the last number of months, I've been dealing with the Recovery Academy of Ireland around championing recovery, and I think we need to invest in beds that people can, and recovery looks different of course for everybody, but we do need to champion recovery, and we need solutions that give people those options. But I think the broader issue is that on the issue of drugs in our country, we need to be moving towards the issue of decriminalising, not legalising, but decriminalising them. And we need to have that debate, and we need to be brave in politics to have that debate. And I think sometimes that's a very difficult one to have. We need to be able to explain the difference between those two things to people. And we also need to make sure that the community-based approach to drugs, which we use in our drugs task forces, is reinforced. We have in Ballymun an issue where effectively there's open drug dealing in some parts of our community, and it's not just in Ballymun, it's in Finglas, it's in Ballygall, in many parts of our constituency. It's not working. Our communities are being used as supermarkets for other areas and for people who are from more wealthy backgrounds. That's not good enough. Our communities are not supermarkets for illegal drugs, and we need to be making sure that people who have an addiction are treated in a way that has a health-led approach, not a criminal justice approach. Councillor Christy Burke.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. I too support the need for injection rooms, but I also want to echo the comments you've just made that one of the main problems in drug rehabilitation, or indeed alcohol rehabilitation, is residential beds and proper therapeutic treatment with good aftercare and all joined up bodies who have to help the individual or individuals. And Lord Mayor, I speak as a member whose family members died of adulterated heroin and overdosed. And indeed in my own constituencies with over 250 young men and women who were buried in the 80s and 90s, who lived within a quarter of a kilometre from O'Connell Street. I witnessed young women with needles in their arms and they were stone dead. I've seen young men and women with young children who died. In one particular family, 5 members of that family and the grandparents having to rear the children. And that's the domino effect. And indeed, in my private life, I work in prisons at weekends in relation to addiction. And one of the fears of any male or female prisoner being discharged and released is straight back into the belly of the beast and no rehab, no nothing. So really and truly, it's a health issue. Injection rooms are a must, but it needs to be a wider debate. It's a pity we only have such a short time to speak on such a sensitive and indeed a vital issue in this city.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Dermot Lacey.
Yeah, Lord Mayor, I'll be brief. I just stepped down after, I don't know, 7 or 8 years or something as chair of the South Inner City Drugs Task Force. And I want to first of all just put on record my huge appreciation for the people involved in the voluntary sector who give enormous time to trying to tackle this, and tackle it in their own estates and flat complexes where intimidation is really rife, and they really are heroes that should be acknowledged by the city. And I agree with everything that everybody has said. I particularly agree with Councillor Deasy's comments. We do need a drug treatment centre or safe drug injection centre, and I just wonder if the manager or any officials of the council are in any dialogue with the HSE about alternative facilities if the Merchants Quay venue doesn't get through the An Bord Pleanála process. Thank you.
Councillor Vincent Jackson.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, like some of the previous councillors, I want to congratulate Councillor Deasy for the comment she made here. For the last, 10, 11 years, I've been chair of the Ballyfermot Drug and Alcohol Task Force. And with Councillor Nadali, we were on a Dublin visiting committee for the education services there with the ETB. We see at first hand in our community, like many of the councillors here, the devastation effects that the drug addiction has right across our city and our communities. There's not a town or a village in Ireland now, unfortunately, that's not affected by it. And but the reality is, about 15, 20 years ago, I remember many of us around this council chamber here, different council chamber, different composition, when the whole issue about the provision of methadone centres was a huge issue right across the city. There was only 2 of them at the time, Trinity Court and Merchants Quay, I remember. And the simple fact of life is, we do need, and one of the councillors said it, we need a small number of these in the various surrounding local authorities, because I think all too often Dublin takes responsibility for everything, and we exonerate the moral commitment that those councils should have. We see it in the homeless services all the time here. They may pay into the kitty, but the simple fact is we need to own our responsibility. And I know with the provision of local services has helped dramatically the whole issue of drug addiction in communities like Ballyfermot. And you know, it doesn't matter where this goes, Lord Mayor, this medical injection facility, there's going to be opposition to it. But as I said earlier on in relation to the provision of public housing, that's what we're here to do. Sometimes we have to make some unpopular decisions. Otherwise, be honest with people and tell them to forget about it. When you hear parents talk about their children being dead on the ditch, etc., you know we need to provide safe areas. And I know, look, in the ideal world, I wish people did inject. That's not the world we live in. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Michael Pidgeon.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I also represent the area where the proposal for Merchants Quay's injection facility is. I think the first time I was canvassing there, the first issue that came up was parking. But the second issue was needles on the street, the third issue was needles on the street, and the fourth issue was needles on the street. A SIF or a facility like this isn't a solution to all problems, as people have rightly said, but it is a solution to some of them. It brings down the number of overdoses, it gives some privacy, some safety, a hint of dignity to people at a pretty rough time in their lives. It offers also a chance to link in on a path to rehab. The alternative, and particularly the alternative for the area immediately around Merchants Quay, is not no drugs. The alternative is public use, it's public overdose, it's needles outside the school, it's people overdosing on the street, it's people overdosing down lanes, it's people, as someone had in recent months, someone dying of an overdose in a public cafe. I support the location of where this is proposed. It's an area in extreme need, but it cannot be the last, and we need to make sure there are other injection facilities, not just in other local authorities, but other parts of Dublin and other parts of the city. Wherever there's a problem, this facility needs to be there. Thank you.
Councillor Dalek.
The people who will use these services are our sons, our daughters, our brothers, our sisters, our fathers, our mothers. We have to treat them with dignity and respect. But that's a two-way traffic too. We need to treat the surrounding community with dignity and respect as well. I believe that medically supervised injection centres will save lives. We lose 700 people a year to addiction. We need to address that. I also believe that these medically supervised injection centre is best co-located on a medical facility. And it's not NIMBYism when myself and Councillor McVeigh say that Merchants Quay is not the right location. I actually believe that it was deliberately chosen so as the whole policy would fail. And I know people might think I'm a conspiracy theory, but the worst place to put it was a place that's absolutely chaotic at the best of times, 300 metres away from a school. I really want this to succeed, and for me it will only succeed if it's located in a better area. We need this, and I agree with the other councillors, we need it in the four local authorities, and we need to have a grown-up conversation. I wouldn't have had this opinion 5 years ago. Come on, good.
Well said, Councillor Dolly. Councillor Chris Andrews.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I agree with the injection centre. I think it's obvious that we need them. When you go out in the streets and you see people injecting in some absolutely miserable circumstances and environments, it's awful to think, like Councillor Pigeon said, or Karina said, they're our family, and it's something that I think in time we will look back and we wonder why we didn't introduce these injection centres before now. I think the opposition to the injection centre is no surprise because of the chaos that has been mentioned that surrounds drug use and around Merchants Quay, outside civic offices. There's this dealing. People are afraid even to walk by. You see them crossing over the road. So it is no surprise that there is opposition to it. I suppose that's for us to try and address and with different agencies. I do think that I agree with Councillor Burke's comments about when individuals get out of treatment and they're into a recovery bed. Maybe if they're in a recovery bed, they're lucky. If otherwise, they're back on the free phone, and it's only a matter of days before they relapse, and that is something that needs to be addressed. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Ring.
Yeah, Governor Margaret, I have to disagree with everything that's been said here. Unfortunately, if we hide away the problem, it's not going to go away. And by hiding it away, we're letting the government off the hook, we're letting Dublin City Council off the hook to a certain extent, because by not facing up to the crisis, we're hiding it away. And what Karina Dalek said, it's our sons, our daughters. Would you give your son or daughter a needle to inject themselves with? Absolutely not. But that we're going to allow the government to do that, and they call it a sanitised and an injection facility. It's just the road to, as the Lord Mayor mentioned, decriminalising. Of course, everyone wants that, and everyone wants drugs to be made legal. This is part of a long-term hidden agenda, and I will in no way support it. I think people on the streets remind us that we have this problem. Let's reach out to them on the street, not hide them away in supervised injection centres. Governor Margaret.
And to conclude the debate, Councillor Janet Horner.
Thanks very much. Just to support the vast majority of the comments here, which are that supporting the supervised injection facilities, and again, I think particularly Councillor Deasy's comments were particularly insightful. And I very strongly support the Merchants Quay proposal. I would also really want to see one in the North Inner City. I know in our area there are so many issues with drugs in families, in communities, individuals that are affected by it, and like all healthcare, it should be available locally to people, it should be available in their communities, and it should be available where they can have the support of the people around them. And I think it is vital that it is brought into the community context, and that it isn't something that is exported and put as far away from people and as far out of the communities as possible. It is something that people are living with in their streets and in their families, and in their communities at the moment. I don't think there is anything to be lost from bringing the healthcare approach into the communities as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. And Councillor Donna Cooney.
Yeah, just to be very brief, because I know everybody wants to go home, but I would be very supportive of this facility because it's about harm reduction. I know across the floor we had people talking about, that you wouldn't want to see your son and daughter injecting. No, you wouldn't. But I wouldn't like to see them over drinking. And there's all sorts of drugs. There's legal drugs and there's illegal drugs. And the Mansion House went through its fair share of legal drugs last year. So just on that note, I think it's about harm reduction, and it's about having a healthier lifestyle and reduction of all.
Councillor Cooney has another 20 seconds.